This is a hurricane.
Apparently it's the tail end of a hurricane. Somebody said that. So, thank you for braving a hurricane.
Our hurricanes have tried to stop us from coming to Fort Lauderdale multiple times.
But not tonight. I think it's fair to say everyone here is wet. Very wet. Totally. So, it sounded like geese just now. Well, welcome to the final story of the Musical Ride Tour.
The final show.
The final show. Don't worry, we're like cockroaches, you cannot get rid of Hanson. We will keep coming back. Hopefully more pleasant than cockroaches, but you know, you get
Really cute rodents.
yes. That you don't want to kill because you see them and they take cheese, but you're like, oh, that's so cute. We're like raccoons. Anyway, the last two stories have basically turned into us being stupid. But we have had a great tour and really enjoyed this entire process. And one of the things that we've done throughout the tour, as we're doing now, is to talk about a specific album as a part of this whole idea of looking back. And so tonight, having being the final show and the fifth album, we're going to talk about Shout It Out. Well, Shout It Out is awesome. Thanks for coming. No. You know, Shout It Out really is kind of the culmination of several albums, and I think the process of making it was influenced a lot by, like you would expect, what came before it, specifically The Walk. And in some ways, you know, there are patterns, especially looking back. You can see there's a pattern with our records. It's a little bit, you know, first record's maybe a little more straight ahead pop, and then the next record gets a little rootsier this time around. It sort of happened again with Underneath. It was more rootsy, but it was still more straight ahead, and then The Walk had a little bit more of an edge to it. And with Shout It Out, I think the thing that inspired a lot of the songs was we really started stripping more and more back, whether it was our team, with our label, our management, and everything, and more found ourselves at the point where we were ready to make another record after years of touring on The Walk. And started talking about and listening to the records that we've always talked about as influences, but the ones that hadn't been as much directly inspiring the last two albums. We talked about, you know, actually listened to a lot of the early Ray Charles stuff and the Otis Redding stuff and some of the early rock and roll records, which we had, you know,
A lot of the
just kind of
saxophone stuff people like.
the saxophone stuff.
People like Booker T and the MGs, people like Sam and Dave, you know, and a lot of Aretha, of course.
And it was sort of like we were getting ready to make another record, and we focused a lot on the lyrics on The Walk, that we didn't want things to be too metaphorical that people didn't get them. And with Underneath, it had been a crazy struggle to just make the record and survive and start the label and everything. And obviously with this time around in the middle of nowhere, they both had their own, you know, sort of dynamics. But with this unknown record at the time, it just felt like we wanted to be able to celebrate, you know, the moment, to celebrate being here and a lot of our influences and
celebrate surviving in a lot of ways too.
yeah, and really, yeah, exactly, surviving 14 years and stuff. And so I think the idea of kind of rekindling some of our influences and just the kind of like, you know what, we don't really care what anybody thinks about what we do. We like what we do. We're proud of it, and we're enjoying making music and doing what we do. And so songs started to get written. You know, no song is only about, you know, that one thought. They all come from different directions, but I think much like you know, seasons in the year, you go through seasons with songwriting, and people, you kind of get a mood going. So one of the earliest songs that was written was Waiting for This. I think we were on tour, it's like 2007, 2008, we would be jamming live on stage, and you know, you mess around in soundcheck, and well, that idea started off.
About the same time that World's on Fire was.
Yeah, World's on Fire. In fact, we started working on it in Lancaster, in that weird Pennsylvania. Yeah.
I don't remember exactly what city it was, but I do really strongly remember working on the song "Kiss Me When You Come Home" while we were on the road. That the kind of piano idea started being played, and then Zach really quickly started kind of messing with the rhythm of it and came up with what ultimately became that signature drum beat.
Well, it was slightly straighter, and then Zach was like, "Let me show you something." Boom, 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 boom.
Yeah. Let me show you how groove works. Personally, as the drummer.
Speaking of randomness, I just have to point this out. Isaac is always ready for a jam session. He doesn't even have a guitar, and he's got his foot on the wah-wah pedal.
He's like, "Wah wah pedal." He wants to wah his voice. I will say one thing, and honest, we can be honest. Is anybody at any other story here? Is there anyone here that saw one of them? Okay, so there's a few. Most every record has some element of struggle in it because that's life. But I will say that Shout It Out was the easiest record, the most efficient, the least conflict-ridden album we've ever made. I mean,
the only conflict was really the decision to go back in and record a couple more songs and do the horn parts and sort of the desire. None of us really wanted to do that because we wanted to be done. We wanted to release a record, but it was sort of like, we couldn't do it.
It's true. Yeah, that was like.
It's like, your birthday party, you've got to invite that cousin, and you're like, oh, I know it's the right thing to do. And then you feel better for it afterwards. I'm a good person.
Just thinking about rewinding.
That was the weirdest analogy. Particular scenario, but I'll go with it.
Why don't we rewind a little bit? I want to talk about, you guys probably have heard some of this, but one of the things that when we had the body of songs for Shout It Out, every record for the last 3, we have moved more and more towards trying to start the recording process with sort of a live arrangement. And so, a lot of times when you make records, there's really 2 sort of approaches that most bands take. One is you figure out the songwriting, and then you begin to build up the arrangement in the studio. You start off with your drums or your bass part, and then you begin to layer it. And we've always, on our first couple of records, we've done it that way, mostly because you didn't have enough tracks to be able to record on all the band at the same time, but also because as players, you're like, yep, one person needs to do it at a time because somebody's going to screw up. But
the other element of that too is also on those first 2 records, more so than anything, we were using a lot of programming and drum beat type stuff, and so it helps to guide that process. So you actually already kind of have a pseudo template for a song before you even actually are getting in the studio and really recording the final drum part or the final guitar part or something. So there's things that are kind of the glue from top to bottom of the songwriting process.
But on Shout It Out, we very much approached it from the idea of arranging the song, much like we would go play it on a live show, and then said, okay, this is where this guitar part's going to come in, this is where this keyboard part's going to come in, and then you go into the studio and you try and capture that first. And we knew that with running the label and life, business, family, everything, that we couldn't start the record in our own studio. We needed to completely go away, turn off our phones, just wake up and live and breathe music only. And so we found some crazy studio out in the middle of the desert in Texas, and woo, Texas desert. I love sand.
Right now, I'm not feeling too good about Texas because they did beat Oklahoma in a football game, but anyway,
you gotta give them one.
Gotta give them one.
We've been getting pummeled. Ike's about but we knew we needed to sort of disappear from other things that were going on, and that was honestly, I think, a big part of what allowed us to record really quickly. And at least for us, we spent 2 weeks, and after 2 weeks, we had probably 65% of the sound and the body of the record with all the major songs, and it already had the attitude, and the guts of what was going to be on the record.
Mm-hmm. And actually, several of the things that happened in that process, which does often happen when you're very focused and deliberate about what it is that you're doing. The things like rough mixes of the song "Think About Something" end up being a primary guide for how that song ends up coming out. Partially because one of the things that's really fun and also really interesting about recording live, which is something that you always know is a reality, but you don't always know what it's going to how it's going to manifest itself, which is the bleed between having the drums 30 feet away from the keyboard. Oh yeah, the keyboard's not a keyboard, it's a live grand piano with mics in it. And so, or the guitar being in a little kind of ISO box of some sort, trying to isolate that.
He's going to the geek.
120 decibels.
What he means is, the piano's picking up the drums. The piano's picking up the drums. The drums are picking up the piano.
Yes, that's what I'm getting.
You can't isolate them from each other.
Yes, I get it.
Sorry, I just didn't have any idea.
And so, my point being, several examples of stuff that ended up happening in the record that were crucial to it sounding the way it sounds. One, Kiss Me When You Come Home. Half the drum sound is the fact that those mics on the piano are on the entire time. We couldn't mute them, partially because it didn't sound right. You were going, oh wow, what's wrong with the drum sound? Oh, and the mixer goes, oh yeah, I've done this and done that. Okay, well listen back down. There's still something wrong. Are the room mics not up loud enough? No, turn up. No, that doesn't sound right. Oh. You muted the piano mics in the intro of the song, so when Zach starts the song off on the drums, it sounds weird. Okay, unmuted. Oh, there it is. It sounds right.
But a lot of the
Turns off the weird filter.
Yeah, exactly. Or for example, think about something that had the same thing.
There's a little bit of a delay on the cowbell, which is the sound of Zach being 30 feet away and the sound coming through over the piano mics.
Oh, no, which was actually the lead vocal mic, yeah, in that case.
Anyway, you guys are like glazing over. Sorry, we thought we were at the NAMM music conference.
Exactly. See, but this is the reality of why it takes time and experience to make records, because you gotta know that stuff.
But the thing about it, the important part about that is that when you're making a record, you unfortunately, sometimes for you guys or for people that are waiting for stuff, we make it first for ourselves. I mean, we make a record we like, and if we like it and we're proud of it, then you share it. If you start making a record for everybody else first, you make really crappy records. And if you have to run around the world night after night, morning after morning, day after day, and play it, you better like it, because no matter how big of a fan you are of somebody, we've heard it more times. Like Garrett, we have heard everything 1,000 times over. And so, little things like Ike's going into, if he's not happy, my life's going to be living hell. And as true with all of us, we've got to all be able to go, yeah, that sounds great. And so you obsess over stuff.
Every single day I'm like, oh, the drums, shit.
But the sound...
And then Jack's like, speak for yourself.
You guys are laughing as if like this is a hypothetical.
That's so funny.
No,
that's what happens.
What? You mean, oh, that's why you went back to the studio. Got it.
But it is also true that little things like that, you can take them for granted as a music listener, but the things that you like about certain records, like we talk all the time about the old school, Motown records and stuff. Part of the reason they sounded the way they did was because it was a bunch of really good players that actually knew how to get it in one take because they had to. And everybody would be in one room, and you'd literally, like a lot of the Elvis records, I mean, you'd have one mic, he would be closer to the mic, which would make it louder, and then you have this whole band around him, and they would turn up these old ribbon microphones, and that would have that sound. It would sound kind of like, this rough, sort of tumbly sound. And, or the Little Richard records, where they would figure out how to make it bigger by getting two drummers to play at the same time. And
they would create that train.
But they would be playing live. So the sound of the Shout It Out record, part of the idea of recording it a certain way was to get closer to some of the things that we like about old records.
Oh yeah, the Little Richard records were recorded, apparently half of them were on a dirt floor in a dirt floor studio, somewhere in
That's why we're recording all of our next record outside.
On dirt floors.
It's gonna be called Open Sky, Big Floor.
It's Native American inspired, right? But those subtle things are part of what makes us excited constantly about the next thing.